Comedian Alonzo Bodden first gained fame as a finalist and then winner of the popular TV show Last Comic Standing. And his career has really taken off since then. Television shows, movies, headliner at clubs and festivals, and he's been a regular guest on the NPR's very popular quiz show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, which he looks at the latest news and current events in a humorous way in front of a live audience. And it's my pleasure to welcome Alonzo Bodden to the WBGO Journal. Great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
You're going to be one of the hosts of the 14th annual Montclair Jazz Festival. How did that come about?
So this goes back. I got to give you the full story. It started out with me doing the jazz cruises, which I started doing in the mid 2000s, like around 2007, 2008. And over the years, I've gotten to know all these brilliant jazz musicians. I mean, part of the reason I got the gig on the cruise and kept the gig is I knew who the musicians were. I'm a big fan of jazz. And when I started roasting the musicians on the cruise, they all seemed to like it. It was like, either this is going to work or I'm going to lose the gig. Fortunately, they've had a sense of humor. So I've gotten to know them over the years. And of course, I got to know Christian, and through Christian, Melissa. And after last year, they asked me if I'd want to host the festival. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So, here I am.
So we'll probably hear some roasting from the stage as you go along.
Yeah, there'll be some jokes. There'll be some fun intros. And, it's the jazz festival. I love when people come and they come to laugh. Just the only thing I can tell them is it's not quite the same as a comedy club. So it'll be a little lighter, a little more fun. We won't have to get into the heavy stuff. But no, it's always going to be fun. And I love working in the jazz world. The creativity of the musicians, and they're the coolest audience in the world. Jazz fans are they're cool. I know it sounds stereotypical or whatever, but it really is true.
And they pay attention. That's another thing. They really care.
They're smart. They're listening. They're aware of what you're talking about. It's all great. Of course, this is going to be a big outdoor festival, and from what I understand, it's supposed to be a hot, sunny day. So people are going to be having a good time, and I'll do my best to not interrupt.
And keep it cool for them. Do you remember the first jazz tune that really impacted you?
Wow, that is, I don't remember the first tune. I do remember the first record. And the first band was Return to Forever, and the record was Vulcan Worlds. I was a fusion nut in the 70s between Return to Forever and Weather Report. It was, all my friends were like, what the hell are you listening to? And I loved it.
I imagine when Chick Corea passed, that impacted you then, didn't it?
It was sad. I was fortunate enough to have met him. He actually did one of the cruises, and I got to meet him. And that was great. But we're losing greats. I mean, we just lost Wayne Shorter. I mean, that's a whole chapter unto itself, right? Just that one person. It's sad. But the other side of it is the next generation coming up. The Robert Glasper and Derek Hodge and Chief Ajua and all of them, who I've also gotten to know. It's like that old saying, jazz is in good hands. All right, it's in good hands. The next generation, and their fusion is hip hop, which is really cool. So,
and I've known you've said this before. There's a lot of truth to the old saying that every comic wants to be a musician, and every musician wants to be a comic. When it comes to jazz improvisation, it's a lot like stand-up comedy, isn't it?
The greatest compliment that I get is when these musicians tell me that my verbal improv in comedy, and they're like, man, that's jazz right there. That feels really good. And there are some of them that are really funny. Christian is really funny. Christian has a great sense of humor. Glasper is really funny. Marcus Miller is really funny. I know some musicians that now nowhere near as funny as me. Let's not get ridiculous, okay? But then Marcus handed me his bass once, and let's just say that musical talent sort of skipped over me. So,
but you certainly can make us laugh. You know, it's to me, it's one of the great releases that we have in this world is to be able to laugh. And when you came back from the pandemic, you used a lot of that material that you went through, the isolation of being in, you know, going, not being able to go anywhere, and then talking to the audience as soon as you got back. Where does the inspiration for you know a bit come from for you?
life. There's so much going on, and I don't know. You know, it's hard to describe. It's like asking a musician, where does the sound come from? And we just have it in us. I just see things in a funny way and report them. But, you know, when you have something as big as the pandemic, right? It was the ridiculousness of it, from being locked in the house, from, you know, at the start of the pandemic, I was in Cape Town. I was in South Africa doing a comedy festival, which Cape Town, incredible place. If you ever get the chance, to your listeners, if you get a chance, visit, see it. It's amazing. I get off a plane from Africa in Los Angeles, and the first thing they asked me is, you got any toilet paper? I was like, whoa, something serious is going on. I don't know, you know. And then the world is shut down and we're all adapting to it. And then there are people who are just like, no, this isn't real. It's not happening. And that kind of thing is mind blowing. You know, there were some things that happened during the pandemic that were, I don't know if they were going on and we didn't know, or just simply beyond belief. But one of the things that stayed with me as being hilarious is a percent of our population that just denies science exists. It's fascinating. It's like, no, that doesn't happen. What? It's real. But so there was all of that. I got a dog during the pandemic. I have a pandemic puppy who has grown into an extremely large Great Dane.
Oh, wow.
Sitting in the office taking a nap right now, which is what Great Danes do best. They are phenomenal. I thought I was good at taking naps. I'm an amateur compared to this guy. And
your Great Dane, the name of your Great Dane is?
Hulk.
Hulk? Must
Yep.
be a big dog then.
Yeah, he's big. He's 160. He's a big guy.
Beautiful.
So, but you know, that was another. I think during the pandemic we had a lot of shared experiences that we didn't expect, and a lot of times humor is in a shared experience. And I'll give you another example, something that we all miss: pandemic traffic, or the lack of pandemic. Remember just getting in the car and driving somewhere? Granted, everywhere was closed, but you could get there quickly.
Believe me, I totally agree with you. The roads were just beautiful during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But speaking of comedy in various audiences, you mentioned South Africa, and we take a trip. Listeners go on a WBGO trip every year to South Africa, but you've been on cruises everywhere. Is comedy different in different places?
You know, I have done comedy everywhere in the world they speak English. I've done it in a few places they don't, but definitely everywhere they speak English. The UK, Australia. Actually, I've been all over Europe and the Middle East doing shows with the military and various places. Israel. So this is what I've learned. If you know how to say my boss is a knucklehead in 6 languages, you are funny in 6 countries. Okay. No one understands teenagers. Doesn't matter what language, doesn't matter. People are so much more alike than different that it really becomes funny when you talk about personal experience. We all have them. The differences are in our governments and our big scale culture things. And those things can be hilarious. Those things can be funny. And, you know, the United States, our number one export is our culture. So anything you make fun of that's American, whether it be movies, music, TV, celebrities, any of that, people know what you're talking about. Canadians know more about America than Americans do. Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of this. The United States of America is the number one reality show in Canada. They're watching and laughing every day. So I love doing Just for Laughs. It's the biggest comedy festival in the world every summer in Montreal. And it's always funny to me how I can mention somebody and they know who it is, where, like they know the Secretary of Education here if I do something about Betsy DeVos. Do you think we have any idea who the Minister of Education is in Canada? Do we even know if they have one? So
We don't. We certainly don't. And speaking
those
of
kind of
news
things.
and speaking of news and current events, how did you get involved with Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me? Because that's all about fun and current events and comedy.
Um, Completely, I'm not going to say accidental, but luck. My agent got me on the show. They heard me somewhere, and my agent talked to him, and he said, "Listen, it's a panel show about the news, in Chicago. It's on NPR radio." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I've done 100 panel shows. I got this." I had no idea how big it was when I did it. I had never heard of it. I had never listened to it. And the great thing about that is I wasn't the least bit nervous. I had no idea. It wasn't until a few months after I started when Carl Castle, the original announcer, retired. And they invited me to the retirement party, and I couldn't make it because I was working. And then they were telling me, like, yeah, President Obama sent a message, and Katie Couric was there, and Nancy Pelosi was there. Tom Hanks dropped in, and I'm like, what? What is this thing? And that's when I found out how big Wait Wait is, and it's been really fun. And now we do a live comedy tour because there are so many panelists who are comedians that we do live shows, and I host a lot of those. It's fun. I love it. And that's another audience. The NPR audience is just a sharp audience. So anything you talk about, they know what you're talking about.
You mentioned Carl Castle. I mean, I used to follow him with my local newscast. He was the NPR main anchor through the years, and it was wonderful listening to him. And he certainly was a treasure, and we certainly miss Carl Castle as well. Now, let's talk about this Montclair Jazz Festival. Is there a certain performer or group that you're especially looking forward to seeing or hearing?
The young people, they are really fun.
Yes, the Jazz House Kids.
The Jazz House Kids. Yeah, Jazz House Kids. So they were on a cruise, and they're really talented, and they're playing, and it's good. And then Marcus Miller got on stage with them and started just jamming. And then they started jamming. Like it was almost like he gave them permission to loosen up. Like, go ahead. And then they really blossomed. So I loved seeing that because in the audience, you could see their faces light up, right? When they're with one of the biggest names, one of the most talented guys in jazz. And he's literally going to each one of them, challenging them to do a solo. Go ahead and do your thing. I love that. So watching them do that, because they were having so much fun. They're not, it's not a profession yet. It's purely love, and they love doing it, and they're learning. So they're trying out different things. So that's really fun. I love that. And then of course, Christian, because Christian, his whole personality is bigger than life and fun and all about jazz. So when he gets on stage, you don't know where that set's going to go. I'm sure he has a set list written down somewhere. I doubt if he's going to stick to it. I remember the Jazz Cruise is a very, there's a lot of people on there that are very, very jazz snobs. You can't just know the name of the tune. You have to know the original arranger and what year it was written. And Christian had them jamming to James Brown, and I was laughing. It was like, oh yeah, that's very, very highbrow jazz right there. So I'm always looking forward to him.
Yeah, you're right on with Christian. To me, I've watched him through the years, and when he meets somebody for the first time, he treats everyone the same, like they're great friends, and he is just as great a person as he is a performer, which you don't find too often. I also know that that you're a sports fan, and of course he's a big sports fan as well. So we're going to have you on Sports Jam later this year, and make sure that we find out about those Clipper days that you were rooting
That's
for for Danny Manning and the rest of the sad crew at that time.
Well, he's a big Philly fan, so I had to watch his heart get broken in the Super Bowl. But it is what it is. I do admire. Like, I grew up in New York, so it's, me and Philly fans don't necessarily get along, but we do admire the passion they have for their teams.
I wanted to ask you about growing up in Queens, now living in LA. What did growing up in New York, how did it shape you as a person and as a comedian?
Growing up in New York is the greatest education you can have. Just walking the streets of New York. Like, it's funny, just the other day, I was talking to a friend who was talking about driving her kid to school. Her kid goes to high school. And she said, it's a great time. We get to talk in the car. I said, you know how I went to high school? I commuted. I got on the bus and train like everyone else in New York. Like, that's the great thing about New York. You're out there, right? And you see people. Like, when you talk about race, I joke, like, how hard it would be to be a racist in New York? Every block, you've got 15 countries. You got people from places you've never heard of. How do you insult them? You don't even know. I mean, all of that is New York City. So yeah, there's nothing. Once you leave New York, there's nothing that's going to surprise you. I love that. Some people say that kids shouldn't be exposed to everything as fast as they are, like New York does. But I'm glad I grew up with that, and I actually loved having grown up in the city. So that's and when it comes to comedy, the great thing about New York, because I started my career in LA, and so even though I grew up in New York, I was one of those can I make it in New York kind of people, and the great thing about New York crowds is you can say anything as long as it's funny. They're not going to be offended. They're not going to judge. They if it's funny. Now, if it's not funny, they will let you know right away. But as long as it's funny, they're not easily offended or judgmental or anything like that, which I love about New York crowds. They when you hit a comedy club in New York, you have an audience that knows comedy, and they know it's good and bad and hacky and this and that. You can't fool them. I love that.
Through the years, we have learned that comedians many times make great actors, and you've been acting as well. Some of our best actors started out as comedians. It's this ability to just to be able to react to the situation.
Well, it's so I'm not going to sit up here and lie to your fans and say I'm a great actor. Listen, I play according to type. I have been a bouncer and security guard to I'm 6'3", 250 plus, and I played a bouncer and security guard to everyone in the movie. Big stars. I've protected Queen Latifah and Leslie Nielsen. You name them, I've been there. But that's what I do. I know some great actors. I've learned enough about acting to know what great acting is. What comedians have, I think, is an incredible ability to listen and pick up details and nuance. That's what we do. We're very aware, and it's funny. It's sometimes you can't turn it off. The great actors can become a character, and the only problem I think a lot of comedians have is we're so into being ourselves, and we're used to working alone. That's another thing. So acting takes on a different talent that, like anything else, some of us have, some of us don't. I love great actors. I always tell my agent, find out how the bad actors get work. That's what we're shooting for. We're not looking for what the great actors do. I want to be one of those guys where they're like, how did he get that job? Let's aim for that.
Is there any particular person in history that you would like to portray?
The character I've always wanted to portray is a bad guy with a sense of humor. And I was actually up for that. I was up for a hitman in a cloning. It was a movie about cloning. So I'll tell you this story really quick. It was a Schwarzenegger movie, six something. I don't remember what it was called, but it was about cloning. And there were three people trying to kill him. And they kept killing each other accidentally. And they would get cloned and come back, So I did it, and it was funny. And the director was like, wow, we never thought of it being funny. This is great. This is really good. Terry Crews got the job. And I always see him. I know Terry. I say, Terry, you ended my movie career before it started. At which point he shared a video from his football career of him getting knocked out cold. He said, if you ever want to enjoy this, if I ever, but just watch me get knocked out. So ultimately, and it's a funny thing that I would never think that I'd get to know the guy, and laugh with the guy. But yeah, a bad guy with a sense of humor would be really fun.
Hosting all these jazz cruises, can you take us on one of those where you just thought something that happened that was just hilarious that you'll never forget?
Oh, getting cussed out by Joe Sample, without a doubt, was one of my highlights. I don't know if you've ever seen Joe live. Joe was not censored in his opinions, and he would let the band have it. I saw him tell off the audience. The audience was singing Street Light, and Joe was like, why the hell would I make a song about street lights? It's street light. He stopped the song, yelled at the audience. So I was backstage and he just, Alonzo, you ain't, and I was like, I'm in the band. I'm cool. It
Wow.
was a special moment.
If Alonzo Bodden could play a certain instrument, what would you have liked to have played that maybe matches your personality?
The bass, you know, Stanley, Marcus, Christian, all of those guys. What they do with the bass blows my mind. I would love to have that talent. I was talking with Derek Hodge about it, and I said what I've learned. And Marcus Miller's taught me a lot about music, just hanging out with him. And he's just, some people are natural teachers. He's one of them. But what I've learned listening, what makes them great is they can do things, they can make sounds that it's not supposed to make. And that's the brilliance to me, because that's the creativity, right? Because we're taught with anything, it can be in music, it can be in writing, it can be in anything. You're taught this is how you do it, and this is what you do, and acting is another. This is how you do it, and then you have the people who are like, why can't I do this? And they do something new and completely different, and you're like, wow, that's mind-blowing, right? I mean, that's what they said about Hendrix, right? That Hendrix used to do things with the guitar that you're not supposed to do with the guitar, and it took the rest of the world 20 years to figure out what he was doing. So when you encounter people like that, and again, I tell people that I'm spoiled in that some of my friends, I'm friends with some of the funniest people on earth, and I'm friends with some of the greatest musicians on earth. If you're on a jazz cruise, you would think a Grammy is easy to win, because they all have Grammys and multiple. You're like, oh, so that's easy then to get one of those. Not quite. They just happen to be extraordinarily talented and creative people. So to be around that, I truly appreciate it and watch it. And after you listen and you're around, you start, I guess, learning the difference. Like, oh, that's why this person is special, or that's why. And then some of them, you can watch the other musicians watch them. That's another thing you see when they play, when certain people play, the other musicians come to watch and come to listen to that person play or listen to that person sing. I mean, Diane Reeves, Diane Reeves sang the intro to the members of her band, and everybody was like, oh my God, that was incredible. Like, you could have stopped with that. You just took names, but it's the kind of musical talent that it's difficult to describe. The other phenomenal thing that happens on the cruises is you have all these musicians who normally don't tour together, normally don't work together, and now they're all on the ship. So these jam sessions happen that are beyond anything you could imagine. When it's 2:00 in the morning, and Christian and Marcus are playing and Glasper's on piano, and then Gregory Porter drops in and starts singing. You're like, is this really happening right now? You know, that those kind of things are amazing. And I mentioned them. Listen, there've been so many others. The late Roy Hargrove, to listen to him play trumpet was just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful thing. And you know, to listen to Jonathan Butler, Raul Midon, and George Benson, the three of them on stage playing guitar and singing. Those are the moments you can't get anywhere else because they're not going to be together any other time. So, yeah, tons of special moments in music.
Those collaborations are indeed special. You're talking about Grammy. Well, Christian has 8 Grammy Awards. You mentioned Diane Reeves. You might not know that Diane Reeves is a huge Denver Broncos football fan. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
She
I did
is.
not know that.
And she's a sports fan for sure too. Now, you may have mentioned the name already of somebody, but if you could have just one more day to hang out with a fellow comedian or a musician, just one day left, who would it be and why?
Richard Pryor, because I never got to meet him. I never met Richard Pryor. I've met so many legends of comedy, but I never met him. So he is the one I would love to meet. I'd love to know if he thought I was funny.
I'm sure he would. Alonzo Bodden, he would think you're funny. You know, I never got to watch Richard Pryor's specials at home in Pennsylvania when my dad was around because they wouldn't allow any swearing in the house, right? So I had to go to other people's places to listen to Richard Pryor all the way back on those HBO specials back on television. But you are thrilling audiences with so much fun. And when we think about this Montclair Jazz Festival, you're going to combine your love of music along with the comedy. It really is a perfect fit, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's one of my favorite things to work. Like I said, is to work in the jazz world. And in this festival, they are the stars, and it's going to be all about love for them and the music they do. And I'll just, if I can have any fun in between and talking, and you know, I love joking around with the crew. You know, people don't understand the crew that sets the stages up and sets up the instruments and all of that. How hard they work, how fast they work, how good they are at it. And one thing I've learned in hosting tons of jazz events, the one thing they tell you as a comedian host, don't touch anything. You walk out there, don't touch you talk into the microphone we give you, and if you're thinking about it, don't touch it. The only one who can is Craig Robinson, because he's a great musician himself, so he's allowed to touch the instruments.
Last question. Do you have a certain special or something coming up that we should know about?
I have a special on YouTube called Stupid Don't Get Tired. And, you know, the way our society's going, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to record part 2. So you can catch that. You can get all of my specials have been released on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon Prime, you can see all of my stuff there. And, you know, I mean, we're in the age of Instagram and TikTok. New stuff is always dropping. So, yeah, I'm out there. AlonzoBodden.com is the website. You can find everything I do on the website.
You can catch Alonzo as one of the hosts of the 14th annual Montclair Jazz Festival, Saturday, September 9th. Great to finally meet you, and continued success.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I hope I'll see you at the Jazz Festival. We get to meet live versus, you know, through Zoom. The pandemic's over. We don't have to live through the screen.
So true. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day.